Shalom, 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 Israel. This is Captain Paul Israel from Kingdom Builders of Israel LLC, and today's class topic is going to be on Yahshua's Words of Wisdom, Part 6. Again, Israel, this is going to be Yahshua's Words of Wisdom, Part 6. And again, this is the second half of Yahshua's Words of Wisdom, Part 6. Okay, so this is going to the understanding. This is Yahshua the Mashiach, the Black Messiah's parable of understanding, talking about certain men that he have given spiritual gifts to. Okay, so this is going to the understanding on certain men that Yahshua the Mashiach, the Black Messiah, have given over to have spiritual gifts of understanding. Okay, so this is the understanding in this parable. So Israel, get out a pen and notepad, because this is going to be a good lesson to discuss concerning about this Yahshua's Words of Wisdom, Part 6. And this is the Part 2 lesson of this understanding. So let's get into it. So we're going to go into the book of Matthew, chapter 25, verse 14, to get the understanding about this parable that Yahshua the Mashiach is basically explaining to his disciples. So this is the understanding when we go into the book of Matthew of understanding. And we do know Matthew was one of the disciples of Yahshua the Mashiach, the Black Messiah. So as you can see in this understanding, it says this, Matthew chapter 25, verse 14. For the kingdom of heaven is as a man traveling into a far country, who called his own servants and delivered unto them his goods. So Yahshua the Mashiach is just giving the understanding about this kingdom of heaven that's going to be established on earth, right? And this man that's been described as being the one that's traveling into a far country, this is really getting into Yahshua the Mashiach, right? This man that's been referred to in this particular verse is getting into the understanding of Yahshua the Mashiach. So where it says is as a man is really saying, is Yahshua the Mashiach traveling into a far country? Okay, and this far country theoretically is just getting into in the last days in general. Okay, because the far country is going into the Hebrew Israelites that scattered abroad through the four corners of the earth, technically. Okay, so this is just a metaphor of understanding analogy. Okay, this far country is just getting into the different territories where the men of Israel are going to be located at in general. So this is not necessarily talking about one particular place. Okay, this parable is really getting into the understanding of certain men that Yahshua the Mashiach have basically given over to having spiritual gifts and spiritual abilities of understanding of Yahweh's righteousness. And based upon that understanding, these certain men that Yahshua the Mashiach was dealing with, right, guess what? He gave them certain gifts to use and to do. So this is just a parable understanding in this understanding. So where it says, who called his own servants. So basically this is going to those servants who are basically going to those men from the 12 tribes of Israel. Okay, that's basically what it's getting into. The men that Christ was dealing with, or the ones that he's dealing with, is of course Hebrew Israelite men from the 12 tribes of Israel. So this is just the understanding. That's why it says who called his own servants. Talking about his servants, his own servants, talking about the men of Israel, the Hebrew Israelites, and delivered unto them his goods. So these goods is technically a metaphor for spiritual gifts. Okay, so this word where it says goods is really getting to spiritual gifts. So Yahshua the Mashiach traveled into a far country, meaning Yahshua the Mashiach went and poured out his spirit to those men who are coming from the 12 tribes of Israel, based upon those Hebrew Israelite men being located in different territories. Yahshua the Mashiach called these men that was located in different territories his servants, right? And these servants were only Hebrew Israelites from the 12 tribes of Israel. And also Yahshua the Mashiach poured out his spirit of understanding to these men in these different territories that you see on this map, right? He poured out his spirit to these men located in these areas, right? And delivered unto them spiritual gifts. That's what it's really saying in this understanding. Okay, this is what it's really saying in its proper context. But Yahshua the Mashiach, the Black Messiah, is speaking in a metaphorical sense. Matthew chapter 25 verse 15. And unto one he gave 5 talents, to another 2, and to another 1, to every man according to his several ability, and straightway took his journey. So it's saying in this understanding that Yahshua the Mashiach have given over to these 3 men in this context certain spiritual gifts, right? And he gave one individual 5 talents or 5 spiritual gifts. He gave another man, who was basically his servant of understanding, who was a Hebrew Israelite man. He gave the next man 2 talents, or which is going into 2 spiritual gifts. And Yahshua the Mashiach gave another spiritual gift to another brother who was a Hebrew Israelite. But really in this context is really getting into those Hebrew Israelite men that scattered through the 4 corners of the earth in these last days, having certain abilities to be able to do the will of him, based upon these men supposed to be the servants of Christ. So it says, to every man according to his several ability. So each man that's walking this earth in these last days have different gifts and abilities to use the spiritual gifts that Christ poured out his spirit upon them to be able to have in the last days. So it says, and straightway took his journey. Yahshua the Mashiach is basically establishing that where it says straightway took his journey is establishing that Yahshua the Mashiach left the earth, or left the scene, right, and went back to wherever location he was at. And we do know Yahshua the Mashiach is in the heavenly realm. That's what this analogy is getting into. Okay, that's basically what this is getting into, that Yahshua the Mashiach, the Black Messiah, is back in the heavenly realm with the Father. But at the time, he poured out his spirit to certain men to have and to be able to do in these last days, so they can be able to what? Inherit the kingdom that's going to be established on earth based upon these men works. But in this context, it's talking about these 3 men, right? These 3 brothers who were Hebrew Israelites based upon their works with the spiritual gifts that they was given, based upon Christ giving them these spiritual gifts to have and to do, right? But really, these 3 men technically is going to a metaphor of understanding with a lot of these Hebrew Israelites that scattered through the 4 corners of the earth, because all these men are laborers, supposedly supposed to be the servants of Yahshua the Mashiach, the Black Messiah, right? But again, these 3 men are in the context of those men from the 12 tribes of Israel overall. Okay, so that's really what this is getting into, that Yahweh allowed Yahshua the Mashiach to pour out his spirit of understanding with spiritual gifts to certain men from the 12 tribes of Israel. But in this context, he's just putting in the understanding of these 3 different men having the understanding of spiritual gifts. But he said talents. So instead of saying spiritual gifts, he's saying talents. Okay, so this is the understanding. So we're going to prove that where it says talents in the book of Matthew 25 verse 15 is really getting into spiritual gifts. So we're going to go to the book of 1 Corinthians chapter 12 verse 1, where Apostle Paul is going to expound on spiritual gifts that was given unto men to have and to do. So in the book of 1 Corinthians chapter 12 verse 1, we get into the analogy that there is a such thing as spiritual gifts. Okay, so we're going to get to the understanding, because the spiritual gifts are supposed to be used for pushing this Hebrew truth and also spreading Yahweh's commandments to Yahweh's chosen people that's walking this earth. So that's what the spiritual gifts is supposed to be used for. So when we go to the book of 1 Corinthians chapter 12 verse 1, that was written by Apostle Paul to the people that was living in Corinth, who are being basically referred to as being those Corinthians. So let's read. Now concerning spiritual gifts, brethren, I would not have you ignorant. So again, Apostle Paul is just expounding on the term spiritual gifts. So that's why I just brought this out, that instead of saying talents, we're going to go into spiritual gifts analogy. Okay, and then we go to the book of Matthew chapter 10 verse 1, where we're going to get proof that spiritual gifts can be delivered to certain men of Yahshua's choosing to have and to do to help spread the ministry to the people based upon those certain men who Yahshua the Mashiach chose to be his servants or to be his messengers. So basically, this is just an example, okay, of understanding of that parable that we just brought out in the book of Matthew chapter 25 of understanding. So we in the book of Matthew chapter 10 verse 1. It says this: and when he had called unto him his 12 disciples, he gave them power against unclean spirits, to cast them out, and to heal all manner of sickness and all manner of disease. So you see this, Israel? So Yahshua the Mashiach, in this understanding, gave unto his 12 disciples the ability to have spiritual gifts. And it specified these certain type of spiritual gifts that he gave to those 12 disciples. It says he gave them power against unclean spirits to cast them out. Right? So he gave those 12 disciples the ability to cause spirits to come out of people. Meaning he gave those 12 disciples the ability to cast demons out of people, to cast unclean spirits out of an individual, whether they was a man or female or a young child, right? This is the ability that Christ gave unto certain men who were these 12 disciples. And it says, and to heal all manner of sickness and all manner of disease. So he also gave those 12 disciples the ability to heal the sick of all manner of diseases, right? He gave these men the ability to do so. This is just an example of spiritual gifts that Yahshua the Mashiach gave over to these men who were the disciples. And these men were Hebrew Israelites. Now you're understanding the point I was bringing out earlier from that parable story. Okay? So when we go back to the book of Matthew chapter 25 verse 15, this is the same similar analogy. But in this context, Matthew chapter 25 verse 15 is really getting into the understanding that Yahshua the Mashiach, the Black Messiah, is really giving over the understanding of giving certain men walking this earth spiritual gifts, spiritual capabilities for this Hebrew truth, right? To certain men from the 12 tribes of Israel of understanding that's scattered abroad through the four corners of the earth. That's what this is getting into, okay? So I just had to compare and contrast at different moments that Yahshua the Mashiach was known to be a man that gave over spiritual gifts to certain men of his choosing. So when we go to the book of Ephesians chapter 4 verse 11, this is just going to get into another situation where Apostle Paul is going to explain certain spiritual gifts, titles that a certain man will have, okay, as far as leadership qualities to help push this Hebrew truth to Yahweh's chosen people. Ephesians chapter 4 verse 11. And he gave some apostles, and some prophets, and some evangelists, and some pastors and teachers. So you see this? So certain men were given gifts to either be apostles. Some men was given gifts to be prophets. Some men was given gifts to be evangelists. And some men was given the gifts to be pastors. And some men was given gifts to be teachers. Okay, so these different titles have different positions and different roles. Okay, so the men who are the 12 tribes of Israel who fall in line with this understanding with these certain titles, these are spiritual gifts, right? See, most individuals may use their spiritual gifts for good. Some people are going to choose to do evil. Some people are going to choose to do righteous things with their spiritual gifts. But it's all gifts, okay? It's all spiritual gifts. That's the point. So now we go to the book of 1 Corinthians chapter 14, verse 1 to get another understanding of a certain spiritual gift that a lot of people don't have. So when we go to the book of 1 Corinthians chapter 14, verse 1, I'm going to bring out a certain gift that a lot of brothers don't have. This is a rare gift to have. Yahweh and Yahshua give certain men these gifts, okay? But it's certain men that have these gifts, but it's very rare, okay? This is not a common gift that Yahweh and Yahshua give unto men that's walking this earth, okay? It's certain men that Yahweh and Yahshua are dealing with personally that they have this ability to be able to have this particular gift and this understanding. When we go into the book of 1 Corinthians chapter 14, verse 1, it says this: follow after charity and desire spiritual gifts, but rather that ye may prophesy. You see this? Just about a lot of men, right, desire to have the spiritual gifts, right? Desire to spread the ministry overall in general about this word, about this Bible, right? But it says, but rather that ye may prophesy. A lot of men want to have that desire to prophesy, right? But this type of gift is very rare. That's not a common gift. So when Yahweh and Yahshua the Mashiach, the Black Messiah, give certain men the ability to prophesy, these men must fulfill that job to be a prophet. Right? They must fulfill that role to prophesy. So things can what? Be put in action. So all things can be fulfilled. So this is a spiritual gift example that I'm bringing out with this understanding. Okay? So to be able to prophesy, that's a spiritual gift that Yahweh and Yahshua give over to certain men to have and to do on earth. So that's the understanding of these different spiritual gifts when we go into the book of Ephesians chapter 4 verse 11 of understanding. Okay, and also when we go to the book of Matthew chapter 10 verse 1 where Yahshua the Mashiach gave those spiritual gifts to his 12 disciples to be able to heal the sick and also to be able to cast out devils out of people. Okay, this is just a basic example of Yahshua the Mashiach, the Black Messiah, giving over the understanding to certain men to have these certain type of spiritual gifts. So now we go back to the book of Matthew chapter 25 verse 15. Now we got the understanding on what Yahshua the Mashiach was coming to do when he was giving over to these certain men certain talents to these certain men to have. But now we got the more clear understanding that it was really getting into spiritual gifts to certain men from the 12 tribes of Israel. But he just categorized these men from the 12 tribes of Israel as being just these three men. Okay, but he's really explaining that it was certain men or a portion of men on this earth in the last days that he gave spiritual gifts to help spread this Hebrew truth to the four corners of the earth, to raise up Yahweh's chosen people to get the right understanding about this Bible. That's what it's really saying. So now when we go to the book of Matthew chapter 25 verse 16, it says this in the understanding and the continuation on Yahshua Mashiach being in the heavenly realm, not being around these certain men at the time, because these men were supposed to use those spiritual gifts to do the job of what Yahshua Mashiach wanted these men to do on earth. So this is the understanding in the book of Matthew chapter 25 verse 16. Then he that had received the 5 talents went and traded with the same and made them other 5 talents. So it's just establishing that this man was profitable with the 5 talents that Yahshua Mashiach gave unto this man, right? He doubled it. He doubled the spiritual gifts that he had, right? Meaning he spread this knowledge of the Hebrew truth, meaning he created an atmosphere for this Hebrew truth to grow beyond the information that he was able to receive from Yahshua Mashiach, the Black Messiah. Meaning he allowed the Spirit of the Most High to be moved on to him to the point where he was now able to double the amount of what Yahshua Mashiach had gave unto him to have a certain skill set to spread this Hebrew truth to the 4 corners of the earth. Because certain men may have the gift of teaching, right? They may be able to have the gift of teaching, setting up schools. They may have the gift of speaking more than one language, right? They may have the gift of being able to be a good spokesperson, right? So the person in this context that had the 5 gifts or the 5 spiritual gifts, who had doubled his spiritual gifts, right, into 10 overall now, because he doubled it, right? It was once 5, now it was 10. So it's just explaining that this particular man, once he got that knowledge and once he allowed Christ's Spirit to be moved onto him, he was able to what? Get a huge following, right? He was able to set up schools or different camps to spread this Hebrew truth. He was able to speak multiple languages, right? He was able to be a good spokesperson, right? He was able to be a good businessman when it became to like develop clothing, develop certain things to help promote this Hebrew truth to the next level, right? So this is just an example of what skill set this man may have had, or these men may have had, right? But he doubled it. And then he shared the knowledge to other men and women and children so they can get the understanding to live right. And then they took the information and spread it further. So based upon this man's works, or these group of men works, the Hebrew truth was able to spread out further. And you see the change from within certain individual lives. Based upon this particular man or this particular group of men doubling in their understanding of pushing their spiritual gifts further to make sure the people that's chosen to get the understanding will get the right understanding. Based upon the spiritual gifts that Yahshua Mashiach gave unto these men to have. But in this parable understanding is really talking about one man. But really it's talking about men in general that was chosen by Christ in the last days to have certain gifts to help lead the people to come back unto righteousness, based upon these people being Hebrew Israelites. So that's what it's really getting into, that this particular man or men in general in this context was able to spread this Hebrew truth at a higher level. Okay? Some brothers had that type of gift to spread this Hebrew truth at a higher level. Okay, where they're able to create different schools, they're able to promote the truth at a higher level than others. So now we're going to go to the book of Matthew chapter 25 verse 17. It says, and likewise he that had received 2, he also gained other 2. So this man in this context who only received 2 spiritual gifts or 2 talents from Yahshua the Mashiach, the Black Messiah, he doubled the amount that was given unto him. So he doubled the spiritual gifts that was given unto him by Yahshua the Mashiach, the Black Messiah. Meaning this particular man spread that knowledge, right? He made sure that the next man, woman, and child prospered off his information concerning the Hebrew truth. Okay, he didn't just sit around. He was about the works. That's why he doubled it. So anytime you double something, that means you put in works. You put in works so it could be profitable for the nation of Israel, who are the blacks, Hispanics, and Native Americans. And also our people that scattered abroad through the 4 corners of the earth. Right? So this particular man spread that knowledge. He was beneficial for the nation because he doubled on the spiritual gifts that Yahshua Mashiach gave unto him to have. Okay, so this is just a prime example of these 2 men when we go to the book of Matthew chapter 25 verse 16 and also the book of Matthew chapter 25 verse 17, where these 2 men doubled in their understanding as far as with this Hebrew truth, as far as opening the door for a lot of people to have the right understanding about Yahweh's righteousness. That's what this is getting into. Okay, and also this context is really referring to, of course, in general, in the last days. Matthew chapter 25 verse 18. It says this, but he that had received 1 went and digged in the earth and hid his Lord's money. You see this, Israel? So you see this, it says, but he that had received 1 went and digged in the earth. So really that's explaining that this particular man, right, he ended up hiding his talent or hiding his spiritual gifts, meaning he hid it inside the earth. Okay, but it's really saying that he didn't really believe this truth. Basically, it's getting to understanding that when Yahshua the Mashiach poured out his spirit of understanding to these men, right, overall, but this particular one man, or these particular men in general, right, they chose not to believe this Bible. They chose not to believe. So they hid the understanding of them knowing that they were Hebrew Israelites, right? Meaning they wanted to remain in the world. And it says, and hid his Lord's money. So this particular man didn't even want nothing to do with this Bible, right? He didn't want nothing to do with this Bible. So the spiritual gift that he was given to have the ability to teach, he didn't want to use it. And also it said, and hid his Lord's money. So he didn't want nothing to do with this Bible at all, on top of that. So he hid the spiritual gift, meaning once he got the understanding on what he was supposed to do to live right according to Yahweh's righteousness, he didn't want to perform the works. And secondly, it says, and hid his Lord's money, meaning now this man wants to stay in his sin. He wants to stay in the world. He basically did not want to repent as a Hebrew Israelite. That's basically what it's saying. But it's really in this proper context on what really Yahshua the Mashiach is explaining is that you have men on this earth in these last days who have been hearing about the Hebrew truth. They've been observing the Hebrew Israelite ministry spreading all over the earth, right? They've been watching the Hebrew truth on social media. But you have some men on the earth in these last days not really taking heed to what the word of the Most High is saying. See, the spiritual gifts of this truth is being planted amongst these certain men that's walking this earth. But a lot of these men are choosing not to elevate their understanding about Yahweh's word. Okay? They rather stay in the world. They rather follow after sin. Right? They rather follow after lust. Because most of these brothers that choose to be unbelievers, they choose to live a life full of sin, guess what? They really don't want to get right according to Yahweh's righteousness. They do not want to believe what the word is saying. Even though they witness this understanding day by day, they hearing the word spoken by the prophets on their street corners. They're watching it and observing the information of this Hebrew truth all on social media, all over the place, right? But these men choose to stay in sin. They choose to stay in the world. This is what this one brother in this context is explaining in the book of Matthew chapter 25 verse 18, which unfortunately he's been labeled as an unbeliever. That's why he's not putting in the effort to double the talent or to double his spiritual gift to be spread to other people, right? Notice he's not putting in no works because this particular man or men in general are unbelievers of this truth. That's what it's saying in the book of Matthew chapter 25 verse 18. So now we go to the book of Matthew chapter 25 verse 19. After a long time, the Lord of those servants cometh and reckon with them. Now it's really saying Yahshua the Mashiach came back to the earth, right, to talk and have a conversation with these men on who he had gave these spiritual gifts to. That's what it's really saying. Okay, because it says after a long time, because Yahshua the Mashiach, the Black Messiah, is in the heavenly realm with the Father and of course with the rest of the host of the holy angels. So on his arrival, he's coming now to talk to these men who he have given over to have spiritual gifts. And we're going to see the reward of these particular men based upon whatever they did with those spiritual gifts. Because Yahshua the Mashiach is going to be a righteous judge on rewarding the men that put in the works based upon those spiritual gifts that Yahshua and Yahweh have given over to certain men on the earth in these last days. Matthew chapter 25 verse 20. And so he that had received 5 talents came and brought other 5 talents, saying, Lord, thou deliverest unto me 5 talents. Behold, I have gained beside them 5 talents more. So now the man that Yahshua the Mashiach had given over to have 5 talents, guess what? Now this man is telling Yahshua the Mashiach, hey, I doubled those 5 talents on what you gave to me. So now I have 10 talents. So basically, this man is saying that, hey, Yahshua the Mashiach, I put in them works. This is what I did with the talents you gave unto me. You see, this man is happy on his achievement, right? He's happy about his achievement that he did a good service based upon Yahshua the Mashiach giving him those 5 spiritual gifts to have. But this is getting into that context that you have the men that's in the right spirit in these last days from the 12 tribes of Israel. Guess what? You're going to have certain men that's walking this earth from the 12 tribes of Israel that's going to be putting in the works so they can be able to get that reward from the Black Messiah, Yahshua the Mashiach. Okay, in the future, when that kingdom of heaven is going to be established on earth. This is that understanding that these certain men that put in them works, they're going to be getting crowned in the kingdom of heaven that's going to be on earth. And Yahshua the Mashiach is going to give them that reward to be a ruler in Israel. Basically, Yahshua the Mashiach is going to give these certain men high positions in the kingdom of heaven that's going to be on earth based upon their works that they displayed, based upon the spiritual gifts that Yahshua the Mashiach had given over to certain men that's walking the earth in these last days. But let's see Yahshua the Mashiach, the Black Messiah's response, based upon this man's response on him saying that he doubled the talents that Yahshua the Mashiach gave unto him to have. He doubled the talents. Let's see Yahshua the Mashiach response on that. In the book of Matthew chapter 25 verse 21. His Lord said unto him, Well done, thou good and faithful servant. Thou hast been faithful over a few things. I will make thee ruler over many things. Enter thou into the joy of thy Lord. You see this, Israel? So Yahshua is saying in this context that he's going to tell those men, well, in this context, or in this parable, he's saying that he's going to reward this particular man based upon Yahshua observing this man putting in works, based upon spreading his word in the right spirit, and also doubling on whatever Yahshua the Mashiach gave unto him to have those spiritual gifts. Guess what? Yahshua the Mashiach, the Black Messiah, say, hey, you're going to be a ruler in the kingdom. You're going to have a high position in his kingdom. So this particular man, or this particular men overall in general, that was operating the right spirit in these last days by putting in the works, right? Guess what? They're going to be in high positions in Christ's kingdom that's going to be established on earth. So that's why he says, I will make thee ruler over many things. Enter thou into the joy of thy Lord. So when it says, enter thou into the joy of thy Lord, that's talking about enter into the kingdom of heaven that's going to be established on earth. So Yahshua the Mashiach, the Black Messiah, is rewarding these men overall that was about the works of the Most High and that was faithful unto him. But in this context, he's just explaining about this one man. But in general, it's really talking about men overall that's walking this earth in the right spirit that's been putting in the works based upon those spiritual gifts, which implies more than one man. But Christ, the Black Messiah, is speaking in this context, explaining just one man, but he's really talking about a big portion of men that's supposed to be doubling in the works of understanding in these last days. Okay. So as you can see, the understanding that Yahshua the Mashiach rewards men that's about the works of the Most High. They didn't take this truth for granted. So they're going to get their reward in Yahshua the Mashiach's kingdom that's going to be on earth. Matthew chapter 25 verse 22. He also that had received 2 talents came and said, Lord, thou deliverest unto me 2 talents. Behold, I have gained 2 other talents beside them. So again, now you have another man presenting talents that he had doubled. So he once had 2 talents, then he doubled it to what? 4 talents. So now this man is telling Yahshua the Mashiach, the Black Messiah, hey, I doubled the spiritual gifts that you gave unto me, and I doubled it. Okay, I doubled it. So this is what I put in the works on. Even though you've seen the works may not have been as many as the previous group of men or the previous man, right? But this particular man still did works with the little that he had, right? It's not necessarily the amount, but it's all about the effort. So if Yahshua the Mashiach gives a certain man on this earth small amount of gifts or a large amount of gifts, Yahshua the Mashiach expect that man to be putting in the works with those certain gifts that he was able to give unto these certain men based upon Yahweh's order. Okay, but this particular man that was given a few talents or a few spiritual gifts, he doubled it. So he was mainly appreciative of what he had. So this man was a believer, as you can see. And also too, you can see he was happy on his works that he did, even though he was not given so many talents or so many gifts. But he was happy about what he did for the nation of Israel. Matthew chapter 25, verse 23. His Lord said unto him, Well done, good and faithful servant. Thou hast been faithful over a few things. I will make thee ruler over many things. Enter thou into the joy of thy Lord. You see this, Israel? So it's not necessarily about how many spiritual gifts that Yahshua Mashiach give unto certain men that's walking this earth, but it matters on what you do with those gifts, right? What actions did you do with those spiritual gifts that Yahweh and Yahshua gave unto you to do? In this context and understanding, this particular man that had 2 spiritual gifts, guess what? He expounded on those spiritual gifts and doubled it. Okay? It says, his Lord said unto him, meaning Yahshua said unto him, Well done, good and faithful servant. Thou hast been faithful over a few things. So you see this? This man had a few talents or a few spiritual gifts, but he was still faithful. He was all about the works of the Most High. This man or this host of men that's walking this earth in his last days, guess what? They may not have a huge following, right? They may not have a bunch of camps all over the place, right? But guess what? With these few talents or few spiritual gifts that they had, they doubled it. So meaning the message got out to the people that needed to get called for repentance, right? And this man or these men in general in these last days with these few talents or few gifts, guess what? They put in them works as well, right? They put in his works. So Yahshua said, hey, these few talents I gave to you, you did good. So guess what? You're going to be in the kingdom of heaven that's going to be established on earth. So that's why it says, I will make thee ruler over many things. Enter thou into the joy of thy Lord. So even with the few talents or the few spiritual gifts that these particular men had or this particular man had, guess what? Guess what? Yahshua say those works that this particular man did or the works that these particular men did who come from the 12 tribes of Israel, guess what? They still gonna get the kingdom, and they're gonna be put in a high position in the Yahshua the Mashiach's kingdom that's gonna be on earth, based upon the works that these men did, or based upon the works that this man did. Okay, basically, this is the understanding that this particular man is going to be entering in the kingdom of heaven on earth based upon his works and his faith and loyalty to Yahshua the Mashiach, the Black Messiah. We're going to explain further that, again, where it says to be basically good and faithful servant, right, is going into being able to establish works. And your works is going towards your works towards keeping Yahweh's commandments and how you live day by day, and how did you show the love of the Most High? How did you show the love of Yahshua the Mashiach, the Black Messiah, in your walk? So this is the understanding when we go to the book of James chapter 2 verse 21. And James was a disciple of Yahshua the Mashiach, the Black Messiah. Point blank period. It says this in the book of James chapter 2 verse 24. Ye see then how that by works a man is justified, and not by faith only. So you see this, Israel? So you're going to be justified, you Hebrew Israelite men, based upon your works. Your works is going to justify you. What you did with the information about this truth. That's what's going to make you justified to enter in that kingdom of heaven on earth. Because most men that's walking this earth that are Hebrew Israelite men, they know they Hebrew Israelites, but they don't have no works behind them. They're just observing the signs of the times, and they just know they just Hebrew Israelites. But they're not putting in works. They just have faith that they Hebrew Israelites, right? They believe that Yahshua the Mashiach is a black man, right? But they're not putting in works with that understanding. That's why it says again, James chapter 2 verse 24. Ye see then how that by works a man is justified. You become justified based upon your works. That's what it's explaining. And not by faith only. So you can't just have the understanding of just, oh, I know I'm a Hebrew Israelite, and that's all I have to do, and I'm going to get the kingdom. No. You have to put in works. You Hebrew men. Yahweh and Yahshua do not like lazy Hebrew Israelite men. Lazy Hebrew Israelite men, they do not want to do nothing to help spread this truth. Or lazy Hebrew Israelite men that just want to just stay in their sins. Right? As you can see, it says this. Ye see then how that by works a man is justified. So Yahweh and Yahshua want to see the works of a Hebrew Israelite man putting in them works to overcome their sins. Putting in them works to spread this Hebrew truth. Putting their works to what? Cause change for the other Hebrew Israelites to be awakened in these last days. That's the works. Okay? That is the works of the Most High. Spreading positivity to the chosen people. And also, these particular men who are Hebrew Israelites must repent as a Hebrew Israelite in the right spirit. That is all a part of the works of the Most High. So now we go to the book of James chapter 2 verse 26. It says this. For as the body without the spirit is dead, so faith without works is dead also. You see this, Israel? So when it says for as the body without the spirit is dead, it's talking about a person that has a body, whether male or female. But if they're not operating in Yahweh's spirit, if they're not operating in Yahshua the Mashiach, the Black Messiah spirit, they basically are what? Spiritually dead. Because they walking in full-blown sin. Because they don't have the love of Christ. They do not have the love of Yahweh in their mind and their consciousness. So they're spiritually dead. And also it says this, so faith without works is dead also. So if an individual just has faith that they just Hebrew Israelites, right? And they just believe that Christ is a black man and that's it. And that's all they know and that's all they're going to hold on to. But if they don't have the works with that knowledge, guess what it says? So faith without works is dead. So you just can't have just faith that you know you're a Hebrew Israelite. You blacks, Hispanics, and Native Indians, right? And you rest of the tribes that's scattered abroad through the four corners of the earth. You just can't say you have faith that you know you Hebrew Israelite and you don't have no works behind it. Because you're going to be dead also, meaning spiritually dead. Lacking understanding. Because to build your spirit up in this walk as a Hebrew Israelite, you got to put in works. Because if not, if you don't put in works, you Hebrew Israelite, you're just going to be speaking all type of nonsense with them crazy doctrines that's out here. Because you just observing information about the truth, but you're not putting it in works so you can stay consistent in the truth. As you can see, the understanding. So you become equivalent just like a person that's walking in full-blown sin. That's what James is talking about. The person that just know they Hebrew Israelites and have faith that they just Hebrew Israelites and they do not have any works as far as putting in the works for the truth, they are equivalent to a known sinner. Their works is equivalent to a person that's in full-blown sin. That's what James is explaining. That you have a full-blown person that's walking in sin. In this one context where it says, for as the body without the spirit is dead. So this is a sinful person because they don't have the spirit of the Most High at all. So faith without works is dead also. So it's equivalent to a person just believing that they're Hebrew Israelites, but they don't have faith to the point where they actually putting in the works. So basically it's a falsehood of understanding. So they really are in line with basically being an unbeliever because they don't have works behind what their faith base is. See, your works is going to what? Justify your faith. Which I'm going to prove that understanding. You have to have works to match up with your faith. I'm going to prove this understanding. James chapter 2 verse 18 is going to prove that you have to have works and faith, right? Based upon the performance. Your performance is going to dictate your faith, right? Your works that you do is going to show what your faith is in this walk as Hebrew Israelites. Whether you male or female. But in this context, we're getting on the men. Okay, the men need to get right with the Most High so their works can dictate what their faith base is. James chapter 2 verse 18. Yea, a man may say, thou hast faith, and I have works. Show me thy faith without thy works, and I will show thee my faith by my works. Whoa, wait a minute. You see this, Israel? So you see what James is saying? He said, yeah, you may have a man that's out there that may say they have, I have faith and I have works, right? Meaning this man is just talking because you have a lot of Hebrew Israelite men out here that may say, yeah, I believe. Yeah, I did this. I spread the knowledge to the people, telling them that they're Hebrew Israelites, so I did certain things. But guess how you really show your faith? This is how you show your faith. This is just an example how James, the disciple, is going to explain how you show your faith versus just what comes out your mouth. So James is explaining you have a lot of men that just talk a good game, right? But guess what? He says this. He says, show me thy faith without thy works, because a lot of people show their faith. They show their faith. I believe I'm a Hebrew Israelite. I'm going to comment on a certain social media post about the Hebrew truth, right? They in essence believe that's strong enough to have just certain comments about the truth, or they may say that they are Hebrew Israelites because they have faith that they're Hebrew Israelites, right? But where are their works at? To show that they're Hebrew Israelites. That's what it's saying. But James is going to explain how you're going to show your faith or show your works by your faith. Watch this. And I will show thee my faith by my works. Your works is going to dictate what your faith base is. Not necessarily what just comes out your mouth. Not necessarily what your faith base is. Your faith ultimately is going to be overall based upon your works. Your works have to match up with the Bible. That's how we know overall in society if what? Your faith match up with your works. Your works got to match up with your faith. That's just basic common sense. That's why we got the understanding that you have to show thy faith by the works. And that's what those men did who Yahshua the Mashiach had gave those talents over to. Those men showed their faith by their works, because they doubled the talents on what Yahshua the Mashiach gave unto them to have. They doubled the talents. So those were actually works that they performed to show their faith. They really believed. They weren't just talking. Because like I said in the book of James chapter 2 verse 18, it started out with men just talking like they have faith and they have works. But where was the action? Where was the essence of the beneficial of understanding to the people so they can elevate the understanding? It wasn't so. These men were just talking. But James say, hey, I will show thee my faith by my works. So you're going to see my works and you're going to see my faith by my works. That's what it's all about, you children of Israel. And that's what those men with them talents were showing Yahshua the Mashiach. They works, which matched up with their faith, because they believed.